The night before Thanksgiving, at 55 years old, I finally snapped. It happened right there in the kitchen. I'd been working on dinner for over 5 hours, pouring everything I had into prepping a 16-dish feast for the entire family. Roast turkey, honey-glazed ham, truffle mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, the whole parade. My feet ached, my back screamed, and I hadn't sat down once since sunrise. Elbows deep in pie dough, hands dusted with flour. I heard the familiar shuffle of Beatrice entering the room like she owned the place. She picked up her tea mug from the counter and, without even glancing my way, announced, "Nora, fetch me the honey. I want some warm lemon water with honey." I didn't look up. "It's in the basket under the cabinet," I said, still working the dough. "Just bend down and grab it." I didn't say it sharply. In fact, considering everything, my tone was almost gentle. But Beatrice erupted. "You know my back is bad," she snapped. "And you still expect me to bend down? Do you have any consideration at all?" A knot twisted in my chest. I murmured, barely above a whisper, "Then maybe skip the honey. Wouldn't want you to throw your back out." Before the air could cool around the words, she slammed her mug into the sink. It shattered. Porcelain shards flew in every direction. And just like that, something inside me broke too. She stood there with that sour, pinched face, the same expression she wore when she wanted the world to pity her. I stood motionless, caught between crouching and rising, flour still clinging to my fingers. From the living room, Dennis and Liam came rushing in, finally stirred by the noise. For one breathless second, I thought maybe they'd ask if I was okay. Maybe, just maybe, they'd tell Beatrice to take it easy. I should have known better. Dennis didn't even look at me. His gaze went straight to the sink, to the shattered mess. "Nora, what the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "She's your elderly mother-in-law, and you're making her bend down to get something. Have you no heart?" Like I'd spent the entire day lounging instead of breaking my back to feed them all. Behind him, Liam still clutched his phone, some influencer's voice chirping in the background. He barely lifted his eyes. "Yeah, seriously, Mom," he muttered. "It was just honey. You were right there. Grandma's not doing great. Why couldn't you just help?" His tone hit like ice. But what came next sliced deeper. "Do you have to make everything a drama? Look at Aunt Diane. She works full-time, takes care of her kids, keeps the house spotless, and she still looks great and stays cheerful every damn day. You walk around like the world owes you something, looking like you gave up years ago." I stared at him, couldn't speak, couldn't move. I was standing near a slick puddle of chicken juice I hadn't even had time to mop up. Liam carefully helped Beatrice out of the kitchen, guiding her past the mess. And just to add insult, he grabbed my brand new apron and dropped it on the floor to use as a mat so she wouldn't slip. Then he stepped over it and left, but not before he cast me one final look. Cold, judgmental, and Dennis, because he always needed the last word, added, "You really ought to take a look at yourself. This was supposed to be a happy holiday. Now look at the mood you've created. Diane and her husband will be here any minute. What do you think it'll look like, you sulking in the corner like this?" They stood there in the doorway like courtroom judges. And me, I was still crouched on the floor, hands covered in flour, picking up shards of Beatrice's shattered mug. The slippery edges kept slicing into my skin, one cut after another. No one offered me a towel. No one asked if I was okay. I was starving, exhausted, overwhelmed, and still they expected me to keep serving. I stared at the cracks between the kitchen tiles, blinking fast, willing my eyes to stop stinging. But the tears blurred my vision. I couldn't even wipe them away. My hands were too dirty. So I used the edge of my sleeve, smearing flour across my face. I caught my reflection in the glass cabinet, a woman smeared with grease and seasoning, her hair sticking to her cheeks in damp strands. I looked like a ghost, like someone chained to a stove, for decades. But Dennis and Liam didn't see it. And even if they did, they wouldn't care. All they cared about was Beatrice, the woman who could play bridge for hours, but thought bending for a jar of honey was too much effort. They didn't care that I'd been up since 4 in the morning roasting pumpkins and chopping vegetables, that I hadn't even eaten yet. They didn't care about me at all. I didn't sit down with them for dinner. I couldn't, not because I wasn't hungry, but because I couldn't bear to be near them. I crouched in the kitchen corner instead. Silent. Alone. I remembered once, years ago, I made a little too much noise while sipping my soup. Dennis, who always reminded everyone of his former life as a music teacher, looked at me like I'd committed some unspeakable crime. In front of everyone, he said, "That slurping sound is the most grating thing I've ever heard, like nails on a chalkboard." After that, I stopped eating with them. They never noticed. Every morning they'd sit around the table chatting about politics or art exhibitions I couldn't care less about. They called themselves an educated middle-class family. Dennis used to teach at a public middle school. Liam fancied himself a freelance, though he barely had consistent gigs. And Beatrice? She'd retired from some local theater group, always carrying herself like she was the town's cultural crown jewel. Me? I was just the girl from a small town, the one who thought she'd work in a care home after high school. Steady pay, decent hours. But then I fell in love, chose marriage, and spent the next 30 years stuck between a stove and a washing machine. Over the years, I picked up sewing work to make ends meet. Custom quilts, placemats for the neighbors, sometimes a matching apron or pillow set if I had time. I earned a few $100s each month, maybe more when I got lucky. But to them, to Dennis, Liam, and Beatrice, it was just a silly hobby, barely worth mentioning. But let me tell you, this so-called housewife job, it was anything but easy. Take breakfast, for instance. Dennis insisted on his low-carb routine, grilled chicken breast and quinoa. Liam wanted something heavier, buttered scrambled eggs and toast. Beatrice demanded her oatmeal cooked down to a creamy mush. No lumps, served piping hot. 3 burners on at once, 3 separate trips to the fridge. And sometimes, I'd be sewing an order at the table while flipping eggs on the stove, praying nothing burned. If I slipped up even for a second, it all came crashing down. Dennis would sneer, "You can't even manage this? What are you good for, Nora? Besides eating?" Beatrice would chime in, "Could you please not look so miserable in the morning? I already lose my appetite looking at you." And Liam? He just stared at his phone, pretending he didn't hear any of it. Like it was perfectly normal for a woman to be spoken to that way. Year after year, I absorbed their cruelty, until it seeped in. I started to believe them, that maybe I was useless, that maybe I truly wasn't good enough. Couldn't cook right, couldn't clean properly, not smart, not capable. But eventually, something shifted. I saw it for what it was. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. The soup would always be too bland. The roast, a little too dry. Even the way I swept the floor was wrong. Over and over, I was treated like a servant who couldn't quite meet the mark. Their bar always moved just out of reach. I stumbled through that final month of the year like a sleepwalker, doing what I always did, hoping things would get better, knowing deep down they wouldn't. That Thanksgiving morning, I woke up before the sun. The kitchen was freezing, the tiles biting cold under my soul. I brewed coffee I wouldn't drink, pulled out the turkey, and began. I don't remember how many hours passed. The tasks blurred into each other. Peeling potatoes, seasoning yams, basting meat, rolling pie crusts. My hands moved on autopilot, muscle memory carved from decades of repetition. But around 3:00 p.m. my stomach clenched hard, twisting like someone was wringing it with both fists. I realized then, I hadn't eaten all day. I turned to grab a bite, just something small to keep going, but the pot on the stove was boiling over. So I turned back, took care of it, told myself I'd eat later. But later never came, because that was the day Beatrice's daughters were coming, driving in from out of state with their families for a grand Thanksgiving reunion. The moment she heard, her eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. She declared, with absolute certainty, that we needed a full 16-course meal. All chosen by her, of course. Roast turkey, honey-glazed ham, truffle mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, baked green beans with cheese, and on and on. A list that sprawled like a legal document. There was no way I could manage all that alone. A knot formed in my chest. I turned to Dennis, thinking, just maybe I could suggest ordering some takeout, lighten the load a little. After all, we weren't running a hotel, but the second our eyes met, His expression darkened, cold, sharp. In 30 years of marriage, Dennis had never taught me much, but I'd learned to read his silences. That look, it meant don't even try, so I bit my tongue and nodded. Said I'd do it. But I am not made of stone. Pulling off a full-course holiday meal alone is a nightmare. Just prepping the turkey and ham had me leaning on the counter, clutching my lower back, breathing through the pain. The sweat soaked through my collar. Time slipped past me in waves. The kitchen grew hotter by the hour, the steam clouding the windows. And Beatrice, she sat in the living room like a queen awaiting service, not lifting a finger, not offering even a glance of gratitude. I'd asked her, politely, to grab the honey herself, and she'd thrown a tantrum, shattered a mug. Dennis and Liam had rushed in, not to calm her down or help me, but to scold me, like I was a misbehaving maid. That was the moment. Something cracked inside me. Clean, irreversible. It didn't matter how long I'd served this family. 30 years. 50 years. I'd never be enough. I wasn't family. I was a fixture. They laughed in the living room, scrolled their phones, talked about Thanksgiving plans like I was invisible, like I didn't exist. I wasn't sweating and starving in the kitchen. I was just furniture. A stove with a heartbeat. Right then and there, I knew I'd had enough. Absolutely enough. Out in the living room, Beatrice lounged on that worn leather couch, flanked by Dennis and Liam like a trio of aristocrats. I didn't need to strain to hear them. It was the same script every time. Dennis said in that soft, condescending tone he used when he wanted to seem reasonable. "Mom, don't let it get to you. Nora never had much education. You can't expect her to understand where you're coming from. She can barely string together a proper sentence." Liam chimed in fast, eager to echo the sentiment. "Yeah, Grandma, don't upset yourself. All she knows is cooking and laundry. Not worth stressing over." Their words slithered through the doorway. I didn't flinch. Beatrice sighed, dramatic as ever. "You know, I always told you Diane would have made a better wife. But no, he just had to marry Nora. Uncultured, combative. Ask her to help and she throws a fit. Bravo, Dennis." I knew what came next. Dennis would sigh and say it. Marrying her was the biggest mistake of my life. He'd said it before, many times. I never responded. That night I didn't look at his face. I didn't care. I just turned back into the kitchen, slammed the processed turkey into the basin, tore off my apron and walked straight to the bedroom. This time I wasn't coming back. I locked the bedroom door behind me. Then I dropped to the floor and dragged out the 2 battered suitcases I had tucked beneath the wardrobe for years. One was already packed: clothes, boots, an old flip phone and a tiny bottle of hand cream I'd kept even though the label had worn off. At the very bottom was the stash I'd been saving for over a decade. A little over $1,400, folded carefully into rubber-banded envelopes. Every penny came from quilt orders I'd stitched together between cooking dinner and scrubbing bathroom. I stared at the clothes inside: faded grays, tired blacks, a couple of beige blouses I hadn't worn in ages. Dull, lifeless. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd bought myself something with color. And then I did remember. It was after an argument with Diane. We'd both shown up to a neighbor's potluck wearing the same bright purple dress. Mine fit better, no question, but Dennis sulked the whole evening. He barely spoke a word. Later, when we got home, he hissed, "You're in your 40s, for God's sake. That color is ridiculous. Embarrassing. You really think you can compete with her?" I had just turned 40. Sure, my skin had lost some of its glow, and maybe my arms weren't as firm as they used to be, but I hadn't thought I looked ridiculous. Until he said it. "Stop dressing like you're headed to a prom," he barked. That night I folded the dress away. Forever. And just like that, my closet turned into a graveyard of navy, charcoal, and shame. I stood up, brushed my hands on my pants, and checked the wardrobe one last time. I wasn't coming back. The house was quiet when I opened the bedroom door. I didn't care where they were. Upstairs, in the basement, gone to pick up more food. Let them be. I rolled the first suitcase to the front door. Then I went back for the empty one and wheeled it into the kitchen. I opened the fridge and began to fill it meticulously. like packing for a journey I would never reverse. The turkey, the sausages, the mushrooms, the lobster I'd bought just that morning, bags of vegetables, blocks of cheese, whatever I could carry I took. As for the leftover salads and prepped side dishes, I left them behind. But I didn't forget the honey. On the fridge's top shelf sat a small jar of wild honey I'd had shipped in from Maine. It was part of a 5-jar set I'd spent weeks tracking down online. Pure, raw honey, with notes of clover and pine. I bought it hoping the teas would soothe Dennis's stomach issues. He'd given 3 jars to Diane behind my back. I confronted him about it once. He rolled his eyes. Everything in this house belongs to me. I'll give it to whoever I damn well please. Don't like it? Leave? That was the moment it hit me. This marriage had never really included me. I was an accessory. Convenient. Replaceable. I'd toyed with the idea of leaving for years. The tipping point came when my sister visited last spring. She'd begged me not to do anything dramatic. Said I was too old to start over. You're past the halfway mark, she warned. Why go through all that now? What will people say? I looked her straight in the eye. I'm not afraid. So she switched tactics. Brought up Lee. He's not even married yet. If you leave now with assets to divide, lawyers involved. What girl would want to join a broken family? Liam, my son, my only child. I raised him, even when Dennis barely lifted a hand. And despite the coldness that had crept in over the years, a mother's heart doesn't shut off so easily. I hesitated. My sister saw the crack and pressed harder. Just wait a few more years, she whispered. Let him settle down, then go your separate ways. Wouldn't that be easier? And like a fool, I agreed. I spent 5 more years swallowing silence and betrayal. Were they wasted? Maybe. But they were enough to drain me. Completely. Enough to make me realize there was no more waiting. There was only now. The front door burst open. Beatrice and Liam spilled into the living room, laughing at something. Probably some joke about politics, or whatever influencer Liam was following that week. Neither of them noticed the 2 packed suitcases by the door. They didn't see me either. They flopped onto the couch like royalty. Dennis came in last, carrying a foam cooler. He dropped it onto the table with a grunt, wiped his hands on a towel, and finally looked up. He blinked at me, confused. His eyes paused, registered my presence, then slid back into that familiar frown. These are Australian crabs, he barked. Just delivered. I want them all steamed. Get moving. And don't drag your feet like you always do. They'll be here for dinner soon. I looked at him, really looked, and for once, my voice didn't tremble. It didn't shrink or crack. That dinner, he wouldn't be having it. Dennis blinked, stunned. What the hell does that mean? I spoke slowly. This is not my job anymore. I'm not doing it. He stepped forward, voice rising. What did you just say? I met his eyes. Steady, calm. Your cook has officially quit. If you're hungry, go find something to eat yourself. Then I turned to the table and swept a stack of plates onto the floor. The crash echoed like thunder. The cooler fell with a thud. Crabs spilled out, skittering under the table and across the rug. The smell of seafood hit the air sharp, raw. Liam and Beatrice gasped. They stared at me like they were seeing a stranger. Dennis stepped forward. A shard of porcelain had cut his hand, and blood was already welling from the gash. Have you lost your damn mind, Nora? He bellowed. If you don't want to live here anymore, then get the hell out. Right now. I stared at the rage twisting his features, but I didn't feel fear, just a strange, cool relief. You're right, I said. I don't want to live here. Not for one more second. I bent, grabbed the handles of my suitcases, and walked toward the door. Behind me, someone shouted. A cup clattered to the ground. Voices rose in a chorus of disbelief, but none of them came after me. Not really, because this time, they finally understood. This wasn't a tantrum. This was real. Liam rushed after me first. He yanked one of the suitcases from my hand and stood in the doorway, blocking my path like some sentinel of decency. Mom, he snapped. What the hell are you doing? You're seriously pulling this stunt on Thanksgiving. Are you trying to embarrass us in front of the whole neighborhood? I met his glare, unmoved. The sunset slanted across his face, casting long shadows down his jaw. For a second, I saw it clearly. He looked just like Dennis. Same cold stare, same contempt. And suddenly, I understood something I had spent years refusing to see. I had failed as a mother. Not because I hadn't loved him. God, I'd loved him so deeply it hollowed me out. But because I'd stayed in that house too long. I let him watch me be degraded, dismissed, erased. I let him grow up thinking that's how women should be treated, that kindness was weakness, that silence was a woman's proper place, that contempt in his voice. It wasn't his. It was inherited, absorbed like smoke in fabric. Beatrice's bitterness, Dennis's scorn, all of it woven into his bones. I yanked the suitcase from his grip. "You've always thought I was an embarrassment," I said, voice sharp as frost. "Well, congratulations, you'll never have to be embarrassed by me again." I turned. Behind Liam, Beatrice's voice rang out from inside the house like a cracked bell. "Let her go. I want to see how someone like her plans to survive out in the real world." Her silhouette glowed behind the hallway light, sharp cheekbones, lips curled, voice dripping with venom. For the first time I saw her clearly, not as a tired old woman, not as a mother-in-law whose sharpness came from age, but as a woman who had never, not once, seen me as human. Liam hesitated. Then, slowly, he stepped back into the house. He didn't fight for me. He didn't try to understand. And just like that, he disappeared from the doorway. Dennis appeared again, stomping toward me, hand still bleeding from the broken plate. "Why the hell are you just standing there?" he barked at Liam behind him. "Can't you see I'm bleeding? Get inside and grab the damn first aid kit." The old me would have rushed in without thinking, would have dropped everything, knelt at his feet, bandaged the cut in silence. But not anymore. I gave him one glance, blank, unbothered. Then I turned and walked out the front door, dragging both suitcases behind me. Rain had started to fall, thin, sharp and cold, the kind of rain that slides under your collar and soaks through your socks before you even know it. I pulled my hood tighter and kept walking, wheels splashing through puddles, leaves clinging to the fabric of my coat. The house behind me faded like mist. When I reached the edge of the driveway, something smacked the ground ahead of me with a wet thud. I froze. It was a photo, framed. My stomach dropped. It was that photo, the one of Dennis and me, taken 2 months after our marriage certificate was signed. The only formal portrait we ever had as husband and wife. For 30 years I'd kept it wrapped in cloth, hidden in the back of a drawer. He knew how much I cared about it. Every time an argument spiraled, he'd dig it out and drop it. Sometimes gently, sometimes like a threat. That image had become his weapon, his silent demand for obedience, Pavlovian. But this time, as I stared down at the frame in the puddle, the colors bleeding, the ink running like tears, something inside me didn't respond the way it always had. No fear, no guilt, just silence. That photo wasn't even the original anymore. Dennis had shattered the first one during a tantrum 10 years back. I had it restored at 3 different print shops, painstakingly trying to recreate what was already gone, much like the marriage itself. Now the copy dissolved in the street, and I didn't flinch. Hearts don't crack like concrete. They dissolve slowly, one drop at a time, over years of neglect. I picked up my suitcase handles and kept walking. Dennis had probably assumed I wouldn't really leave, that I'd cool off and crawl back before nightfall. I imagined him now, pacing in the living room, voice raised for the neighbors to hear. "Fine. You want to leave? Go ahead. First thing after the holiday, we're signing those papers. See how long you last out there." I almost laughed. How had I stayed married to such a performative, petty man for 3 decades? He always cared more about how things looked than how I felt. His pride mattered more than my pain. He didn't ask why I'd reached my breaking point, only how it would reflect on him. Something crashed behind the house, probably another bowl or chair. Maybe they'd noticed by now that I'd taken all the good food too. Maybe regret was setting in. But still, none of them came after me. Of course not. Chasing me would require effort. Through the cracked kitchen window, I heard Beatrice screech, "Go bring her back. She took the whole damn dinner. What are we supposed to eat, crackers?" Dennis and Liam must have stood there, arms crossed, each waiting for the other to move. but neither of them did. Outside, the town glowed with holiday warmth. Porch lights flickered one by one down the block. A speaker played some jazzy Thanksgiving tune outside the corner store. Somewhere nearby, the pop of a popcorn machine echoed faintly through the mist. The air smelled like cinnamon and wet leaves, like celebration. But none of it belonged to me. The streets were quiet. Everyone else was gathered around dining tables, sharing laughter and warmth. And me, I was just a woman in a soaked coat, dragging 2 suitcases through the rain. A ghost cut from the script. Only this time I didn't want back in. I turned off the neighborhood street and stepped onto the road that led to Willowton, an old 2-lane highway, slick with rain, empty. I paused at the shoulder, dropped my suitcases beside me and waited for a car. Any car. Most people these days would pull out a phone and call a ride, but not me. Dennis had always called me technologically hopeless, and I suppose he wasn't wrong. I barely used Facebook. Instagram confused me. I'd never once watched a video on TikTok. And ordering takeout, forget it. Even the phone I had now wasn't mine. It was Liam's hand-me-down from last year. I'd spent so long letting the world pass me by that I hadn't noticed how far behind I'd drifted. Time used to move slowly. You stood by the roadside, and a carpool van would stop. No questions asked. Now I stood under the gray sky, waiting for someone, anyone to stop. The rain thickened. My coat clung to my back. Still, I waited. And then, a pair of headlights shimmered through the mist. A yellow cab. It pulled to the side with a soft squeal, windshield wipers swishing. The door opened and out stepped Veronica. Veronica Brooks. Of course, she was Dennis's old college girlfriend. My former classmate, too. Back in the day, her mother had torn them apart, insisting Dennis was too poor for someone with Veronica's potential. She was married off to a wealthy building supplies tycoon and vanished out of state. Life, though, hadn't been kind. She'd ended up divorced, developed health issues after giving birth to her only daughter, and returned to town a few years ago to help raise her grandson. These days, she split her time between the city and here, always dressed like a CEO, her heels clicking across the bricks outside my house every morning, like a declaration of victory. I'd watch her sometimes from the kitchen window, her handbag swinging, her hair pinned just. She always gave me this look as she passed, a glance dressed in glass and gloss, the kind that didn't say hello, didn't say goodbye, just look how far above you I am. Truth was, I didn't envy her. Not really. Anyone who's raised a child alone earns my respect, but Veronica's brand of success was the sharp, performative kind. Every word dressed in polish, every gesture a silent performance for an imaginary audience. And she never missed a chance to jab. Once she said, "You know, if my mother hadn't interfered, you never would have ended up with Dennis." Audacity in a velvet box. And now, here she was, stepping from a yellow cab, right into the rain beside me. Her heels didn't even sink into the wet gravel. She was wrapped in a crimson wool coat that hugged her waist like a second skin, with a fitted black dress underneath, and tall boots that gleamed despite the drizzle. Her leather bag perched perfectly on her arm like it had its own ego. "Well, well," she said, stopping in front of me. Her voice dripped with sweetness, the kind that leaves a bitter aftertaste. "It really is you, Nora, towing suitcases on Thanksgiving. What's the occasion? Moving out?" I didn't answer, just met her gaze, steady. She chuckled lightly, like she was the only one in on the joke. "Don't tell me it's about those jars of honey Dennis dropped off the other day." "Oh, Nora, you let that get to you." She shook her head, voice syrupy. "You're too sensitive." She tilted her head, eyeing me up and down. "You're not like me. You don't have a job. No income. No idea how the real world works. You walk out on Dennis and then what? Planning to live on thin air?" Her words didn't sting. Not anymore. I looked up at her. My parka hung wet against my frame, my hood halfway down from the wind, rain dripping from the ends of my hair. And still I didn't feel cold. I felt awake. "You're right," I said softly. "I'm not like you." Her expression flickered just a blink of surprise. I don't play dress up for the world. I don't scheme behind smile. You pour all your energy into looking like a success, but let's not pretend you got here on grit alone. After your divorce, your family caught you when you fell. You flashed a few smiles and someone handed you a desk and a salary. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. I've stayed home all these years and let life wear me down. I raised my son. I looked after Dennis's mother for 3 decades. I scrubbed bathrooms, fixed leaky pipes, cooked 3 separate meals every morning while sewing quilt orders with my free hand. Her smile had vanished. I don't know how to use those apps you live on. I don't stage selfies or quote fake hustle culture for likes, but I know how to live. I know how to keep a house warm in winter, how to stretch a roast into 3 meals, how to hold someone's hand when they're dying and still remember to pay the water bill. I stepped closer. My voice never wavered. You don't know how to do any of that. All you know how to do is look down on people and call it confidence. But deep down, you're clinging to an image you're terrified to lose. That got her. Her smile snapped off like a branch in ice. What replaced it was something far colder, her real face. I turned from her, grabbed the suitcase handles and walked toward the cab. The driver looked up but didn't question anything. Before I climbed in, I glanced back at her once more. You think I won't survive without Dennis, I said quietly, but this is the first time I've ever really started to live. Then I got it. The car door clicked shut with a quiet finality. Rain beaded on the window as we pulled away, the streetlights casting golden streaks across the glass. Soft jazz played on the cab's radio. In the rearview mirror, the town began to fade behind me. I gave the driver an address. He glanced at me through the mirror and asked kindly, "Just moved?" I nodded. No other words needed. The woman I was headed to see, May, had once lived across from me. For years she stood at her garden gate, waving me over with that quiet confidence only truly good people seem to possess. "You shouldn't be cooped up in that house your whole life," she used to say. She'd invited me more than once to work with her at the senior care center, said I had warmth, that I deserved better than a life buried behind a stove. I never took her up on it, not back then, but May had always said, "If the day ever comes where you need to leave, the extra room's yours, no questions asked." I never thought that day would arrive. And yet, here it was. When she opened the door, she had a skeleton hand apron on, and a wet dish rag tossed over one shoulder. She blinked at me for exactly 3 seconds, her gaze drifting from my dripping coat to the suitcase still in my hand. Then she stepped forward and pulled me inside without a word. She handed me a towel and with a small knowing smile, said, "I knew this day would come. I'm just glad you made it." I smiled back, though my nose burned and my throat felt tight. That night, over a simple dinner of vegetable soup and toast, I told her everything. 30 years of silence. The cold. The ache of being invisible. The moment I decided I was done. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer cliches or play therapist. She listened, and when I was done, she reached across the table, gave my hand a light squeeze and said, "You should have left a long time ago, but I'm glad you finally did." Then, after a long breath, she added, "It's not too late, Nora. It never was." The next morning, May brought me to the senior care center where she worked. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and bleach, the kind of warm, clean scent that wraps around you like a soft quilt. "We've got an opening," she said, leading me through the hallway past open doors and cozy rooms filled with crocheted blankets and aging photo frames. "Assistant caregiver, you don't need a license, just heart and a willingness to learn. Most of it is companionship, light cleaning, a little meal prep." I blinked at her, hesitant. "I haven't held a job in 30 years. May shrugged, completely unbothered. "Doesn't matter. You've been working for 30 years, Nora. This time, you'll just get paid." I tried to joke. "I can't even use a smartphone properly. You sure that's not a deal breaker?" She grinned. "You're kind. You're a great cook. You pay attention. And you actually listen when people talk. That means more than knowing how to swipe through an app." That first day, I was nervous. My hands trembled when I clocked in. I folded laundry like it was a final exam. I felt unsure, exposed, like someone wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. And then something happened. An elderly woman, Miss Klein, reached out and grabbed my hand while I was fluffing her pillow. Her fingers were papery and warm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You remind me of my sister," she whispered. "She passed away when I was just a girl, but she had your eyes." She wouldn't let go for a full minute, and I didn't mind. Something in that moment cracked open inside me. Every ounce of patience I'd built while babysitting a roast or listening to Beatrice drone on about bridge tournaments suddenly mattered. All that invisible labor, it had weight here, value. That night, back at May's place, I opened a dusty plastic storage box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the patchwork pieces I'd stitched together over the past decade. Little fabric purses, apron samples, pillow covers. I'd sewn them late at night while Dennis and Liam snored upstairs. My only light, the stove hood bulb. May sat beside me on the floor, running her fingers gently over the hand-stitched seams. "Nora," she said, wide-eyed, "these are beautiful. You've been making these all this time, and only selling them at the street market." I gave her a sheepish shrug. I never had time to do anything more. There was always something at home that needed me. She got up, pulled out her laptop and opened it with a flourish. "Well, it's time the world saw the. Trust me, Threadnest is made for this kind of work." "Thread what?" "Threadnest," she repeated, with a smile. "It's like an online marketplace for handmade stuff. Artisans, creators, people like you." I frowned. "May, I barely know how to check my email." "Then I'll teach you." And she did. She showed me how to create a profile, upload photos, write simple product descriptions, and set prices. I stumbled through it, clicking the wrong buttons and fumbling the setting. May just laughed and said, "You're picking this up faster than I did back in the day." That night, I listed 3 coin purses, took photos of each one by the window with natural light, like she suggested. The next morning I woke to a notification, 1 order, shipping to Michigan. My heart thudded so hard I felt it in my fingertips, faster than the day I brought Liam home from the hospital. I stared at the screen, blinking. Then I laughed through tears. I didn't realize we're falling. My phone buzzed again. May calling from the kitchen. "Breakfast ready." I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater and called back. "Coming." That meal, just eggs and toast, tasted better than anything I'd eaten in years. Later that evening, I pulled out one of May's old notebooks and started to write. The pages smelled faintly of lavender and ink. "I don't know what the future looks like," I wrote. "But I know one thing. This life finally belongs to me." I closed the notebook and stared out the window. The city lights shimmered through the drizzle, warm and distant. And for the first time in decades, I felt solid, real, home. 3 days later, I got the first call. It was Diane, Dennis's sister. Her voice was strained with an artificial politeness she couldn't quite disguise. "Hey Nora, how've you been? Things at home have been, well, a little chaotic since you left." I smiled faintly. "Oh, you mean the dinner where no one wiped the table? The turkey was burnt, the kids were rolling on the floor, and the elderly were moaning about their backs." She paused. "So, you're really not coming back?" "No," I said gently. "I'm really. And do me a favor. Tell your brother it's time he learned how to take care of himself." I hung up. Not with anger, not with pride, but with something softer. A quiet release. Later that day, May returned home from work full of town gossip. She peeled off her scarf, kicked off her boots, and couldn't wait to spill it all. "You want to hear how the Great Dawson Thanksgiving went down?" I nodded, already smiling. She plopped down at the kitchen table. Beatrice spent the whole afternoon grumbling about the unwiped floor. Dennis walked into the kitchen and found a single scorched pot of chestnut pumpkin soup still simmering. Liam, bless him, tried to reheat it and ended up dumping in too much water. May raised her eyebrows. Apparently he thought it was from a soup. "Didn't you say you just add water and heat it up?" she mimicked, rolling her eyes. Dennis snapped. "Of course. That's the stock Nora made last week. You ruined it." They bickered like 2 overgrown toddlers. Beatrice slammed her hand against the chair. "What did I tell you? That woman didn't deserve it." Relatives started arriving just as the chaos peaked. No food on the table, smoke in the kitchen, and the house buzzing with resentment. May leaned back, grinning. And guess who showed up right then with a tray of pastry? Veronica, I said, already knowing. Veronica, she confirmed, looking smug as ever. Didn't say a word, just sat beside Dennis like a replacement queen and offered him a cherry tart. We both laughed deep, belly-shaking laughter that filled the kitchen like steam from a warm pot. And for once, I didn't feel bitterness, just peace. That night, after May went to bed, I sat at her desk with the soft glow of the laptop screen lighting my hand. My Etsy storefront thread nest had a few new notifications, 2 orders, 1 bookmark, and a message from someone in Vermont asking if I could make a custom tea cozy for their grandmother's birthday. I answered yes. Then slowly I opened another tab, typed 4 quiet words. Fairpath Legal Services. I hovered over the application form for a long time, my fingers tracing nervous circles on the trackpad. It asked the usual name, contact, years married, current employment, reasons for divorce. I filled in each box, methodical and calm. But when I reached the final question, do you wish to pursue spousal support? My hand stilled. Then my phone lit up beside me. A text. From Liam. Mom, how long are you planning to drag this out? I stared at the screen, felt the familiar sting of dismissal, accusation, the unspoken "you're making things hard for us." I didn't reply. Instead, I turned back to the screen and clicked submit. The next morning, I got a call from a woman named Jen. She was in her early 30s, sharp-eyed and kind-voiced, and within 5 minutes, I could tell she didn't miss a thing. 30 years of unpaid labor, elder care, and child rearing, she said after I explained. Yes, Nora, that absolutely qualifies as grounds for spousal support and property division. I hesitated. It's not about money. I'm not trying to punish him. She softened. It's not about revenge. It's about fairness. You gave your life to a household that didn't pay you back. You're entitled to leave with more than a broken back and a suitcase. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. I just want closure, something real. Then that's what will get you. 3 days after the petition was filed, Dennis, his voice was tight, coiled with disbelief and fury. You really want to go down this road? He said. You want to blow up this family over? What, bruised feelings? My voice was steady. You blew it up a long time ago. I just stopped pretending it was whole. He scoffed. What kind of woman does this to her own family? After everything I've done for you, you didn't do anything to me, Dennis. I said quietly. That's the problem. You stopped seeing me a long time ago. There was a long, brittle silence. Then the line went dead. A week later, Liam showed up outside the senior care center, where I now worked. He wore a hoodie that had seen better days and clutched a paper bag from the bakery. His face was pinched, unsure. I'm not here to argue, he said. I just wanted to see you. I took him inside and sat him down in the staff break room. Poured him a glass of warm water like I used to when he was a child coming in from the snow. He looked around at the space, at the colorful quilted wall hangings, the bright patchwork pillows, the bulletin board with my name listed under activity lead, Tuesday quilting. You made all this? He asked. I nodded. He blinked. I thought you only knew how to cook. I smiled faintly. That's what your father always said. That didn't make it true. He didn't argue. Just sat quietly, holding the cup in both hands. The house is a mess, he admitted, like completely fallen apart. I didn't realize how much you did until you weren't there to do it. I stayed quiet. He stared down into the cup. Do you really have to go through with the divorce? I looked at him carefully, saw the hesitation, the small crack in his certainty. I could have comforted him, could have explained more, but instead I asked, tell me, Liam, your father doesn't know how to run a washing machine. Do you think someone like that is worth the rest of my life? He looked like I'd slapped him. He didn't answer, just lowered his eyes and nodded once, as if the realization had finally caught up. He stood to leave, hesitated, then said, you look better than ever. I mean that. I'm glad you're okay. I smiled. I'm not just okay. I'm finally alive. That version of me, the one who waited for understanding, who begged for crumbs of validation, that woman no longer existed, and I didn't miss her. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. Jenna was efficient and ruthless when necessary, filing every paper like clockwork. Dennis tried to stall, of course, dragged his feet, sent unnecessary counters, whined about betrayal and loyalty. But Jenna laid out the facts. Clean, clear. When I requested a return of the joint savings account Dennis had quietly drained, his face turned pale. We had the record, his card statements, monthly charges at an upscale spa under Veronica's name, Italian leather handbags, boutique winery memberships. He sputtered about shared household upgrades. "Did Veronica live in your household, Mr. Dawson?" Jenna asked, her voice sharp as glass. Dennis didn't answer, because the truth was, he'd been bankrolling Veronica while I was clipping coupons for groceries. 2 days after the court ruling, Veronica left. She packed fast, took her handbag, her facial creams, and the last jar of wild honey from my main set. Didn't leave a note, didn't even close the bathroom drawer. Dennis called her, frantic. "What the hell was I to you?" Veronica's voice, according to what May heard from the grapevine, was smooth and airy. "You called it generosity, Dennis. Voluntary. You said I deserved to treat myself after all my emotional labor. Remember?" He shouted something unintelligible. She just laughed. "Then consider it tuition. Lesson learned." She hung up. And just like that, she was gone. No hair on the pillow, no dishes in the sink. Just a memory. What Dennis thought was freedom turned out to be an unpaid bill, and what he thought was power, it vanished like steam. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Dennis moved out of the 2-story house we once shared. The house I'd filled with meals, traditions, and order had become too much for him. Beatrice was transferred to a senior care facility on the edge of Willowton. Sometimes May would hear from the staff that she complained to anyone who'd listen, about the bland food, about her aching feet, but mostly about how no one came to visit her. Not Dennis. Not Liam. No one. But Dennis? He had no room for anyone else's grief. He was drowning in his own. The mortgage, the unpaid utility bills, the leaking roof, the endless sink full of dishes, things I had once managed without thanks or pay. He'd never learned how to clean a drain or pay the gas bill on time. And now, there was no one left to rescue him. The world he'd built, propped up by my labor, had caved in. Meanwhile, my life was blooming in quiet, steady ways. Once orders on Threadnest became consistent, May helped me apply for a small apartment in the heart of Willowton. It wasn't big, a 1-bedroom above a flower shop, but the sunlight that poured through the windows every morning made it feel like a palace. In that apartment, I built something sacred. The wooden table by the window had been salvaged from a sidewalk junk pile. I sanded it down and painted it a soft, creamy white. It became my workbench, my sewing corner, my thinking spot. The curtains were stitched together from scraps of old dresses I'd been told were too loud or too young. I wore those colors again, rose pink, robin's eggs blue, a citrus orange that made me smile every time I looked at it. My fridge always had homemade jam. My couch was dressed in throw pillows. I'd sewn myself in deep amber and sunflower gold. On the shelf by the door sat a tiny hand-bound ledger where I tracked sales, supply orders, and shipping costs. My business. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. May and I still shared a booth at the weekend craft market. We found a rhythm. She arranged the displays and charmed the customers. I sewed behind the booth, answering questions and sketching new designs. Our regulars returned every Saturday, some for my quilted runners, others for May's herbal sachet. "Your work feels like home," one customer said, pressing a warm palm to a patchwork pillow. "It's got heart. You don't see that anymore." Some nights after the booth was packed away, I sat on my little balcony with a cup of red tea. I'd watch the family across the street eat dinner on their patio, laughter echoing in the golden air. Their dog barked at passing bikes. Wind rustled the leaves, and I would breathe. Just breathe. I no longer flinched when a door slammed. I no longer jumped when a phone buzzed. And slowly my nervous system, trained for decades to anticipate criticism, began to unwind. Liam started visiting once in a while too, not out of guilt, but something else, something better. He always texted ahead now. Would it be okay if I stopped by? And when he came, He didn't arrive empty-handed. One time, he brought cookies he'd baked himself. Another time, a second-hand book on textile design he'd found at the library. He no longer said "Mom" like it was a weapon or a burden. He said it with care now, like he was learning who I was, not just what I'd done for him. He'd sit at the edge of my couch and ask, "Do you think this essay angle works? Or could I help you photograph some of your work for the show?" Once he said quietly, "I remember that patchwork skirt you made when I was a kid. Do you still have the fabric scraps?" We didn't talk about the past much. Not the bad parts. Not yet. But we were building something new. Not mother and son as before, but two people who had survived the same storm, and were learning now to walk side by side. One afternoon, he stood at the door, backpack over his shoulder, and said, "You look better than ever." I smiled. "Thanks. I mean it," he said. "I'm really happy for you." I didn't say much back, didn't need to. The pride in my chest was enough. I had no desire to fall in love again. No fantasies of being swept off my feet. I didn't need saving. I had my craft, my income, my community, my son, who was slowly, honestly, learning to see me. I had May, who had opened her door when I had nowhere to go. And that was more than enough. One afternoon, I wandered into a little shoe shop downtown, the kind of place with soft jazz playing and leather flats displayed like treasures. I took my time. No one rushed me. No one needed me to hurry back to stir soup or wash lettuce, or drive anyone to the pharmacy. And for the first time in 3 decades, I bought shoes for myself. Soft brown leather. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just comfortable, durable. All those years I'd worn Dennis's bargain bin picks, or Beatrice's hand-me-downs. Shoes, she declared, still perfectly good. I'd smiled and said thank you, and then worn them until the soles wore through. But this pair? I paid for it with money I'd earned from my own hand. Every stitch, every order, every customer. It all brought me here. When I slipped them on, I saw myself in the mirror. Not the tired ghost I used to be, but a woman who chose this life, who walked away from what broke her, who knew her worth. And I thought, this is how I will walk into the rest of my life. Quiet, steady, and finally free. Work at Willow Haven was settling into a rhythm. What began as light support, serving meals, folding laundry, tidying rooms, soon grew into something rich. I started helping with activities, learning the schedules, the little needs. On Tuesdays, I led quilting hour. What began as a humble circle with 3 women quickly grew. They brought scraps from home, asked for advice, debated over fabric choices and stitching styles like teenage girls whispering secrets. Mrs. Klein, who'd once clutched my hand with tears in her eyes, now insisted on sitting next to me every time. "You've got that little French edging I like," she'd say, nudging me with a wink. And I'd laugh, not politely but fully. Each week someone new joined. A daughter visiting her mother, an orderly curious about patchwork. The class became a favorite, not just for the activity but for the feeling it brought: community, creativity, care. I never expected to feel celebrated for the very same hands that were once overlooked. Decades of sewing late at night, meant to bring comfort to people who never noticed, were now being praised, requested, even admired. What was once dismissed as just a hobby was now my livelihood, my pride, my offering to the world. Back home in my apartment, Threadnest buzzed with new messages almost daily. I wasn't selling hundreds of products, but each order was meaningful. A woman in Arizona asked for a quilted baby blanket. A couple in Oregon wanted custom dinner table runners. One college girl messaged me, "Your coin purses remind me of the one my grandma used to carry. It's soft and nostalgic. Thank you." Sometimes I just sat in front of the laptop and read the feedback, letting the warmth of those words sink into places that had long gone numb. I was feeding myself again, not just with meals but with purpose, connection, dignity. But while my life stitched itself together, Dennis's began to unravel with visible threads. Word around town was that Beatrice's health had declined. At the senior facility, she grew more irritable by the day, snapping at nurses, refusing her medication. No one came to visit her anymore. Dennis? He could barely manage his own household, garbage piled behind his door. His washing machine sat stuffed with damp clothes for days at a time. The fridge reeked of spoiled milk. The sink, always my responsibility, was now a graveyard of plates soaked in gray water. And Liam, the weight landed on him. After I left, by process of elimination, he became the caretaker. Grocery runs, pharmacy pickups, bill management, tracking insurance claims, watching Beatrice when no one else could. Things he'd never once thought about. At first, he brushed it off. It's fine, just errands. But reality hits like boiling water, slow at first, then burning. He tried cooking. The chicken turned to rubber. The rice burned. One time he forgot to defrost something, and Dennis lost his temper. "What the hell is wrong with you? Can't you handle a basic meal?" Liam started ordering takeout, but Dennis complained. Too greasy, too cold, too expensive. Their arguments grew sharp, vicious, then eerily quiet, like two hedgehogs, bumping into each other's spikes but refusing to move. The house grew heavy with silence. Not peace, but a stale, suffocating kind. Like oil and mildew hanging in the air. Liam holed up in his room, unable to write. His deadlines piled up. He ignored calls from editors. Stared at his screen like it had betrayed him. The only person he still spoke to was Ivy. She worked part-time at the town library. Smart, observant, kind, but not indulgent. They'd dated quietly for almost a year. One night, overwhelmed, Liam unloaded everything on her. The mess, the resentment, the exhaustion. But Ivy didn't rush to soothe him, didn't offer a soft landing. Instead, she said something that took him by surprise. "You know," she began gently, "when we were kids, your mom used to wait outside the library for you after school. I remember her standing in the corner by the book drop, not making a sound, just smiling when you finally came out." Liam blinked. "Oh, and Mom used to say your mother was the most polite, quiet woman she ever met. Said she always straightened the book displays while waiting. Never called out, just helped gently." He frowned. "So?" Ivy shrugged, but her voice held steel. "You keep calling her emotional and capable. But the woman I saw growing up, she wasn't that." She looked at him squarely. "Your dad, I don't remember ever seeing him at your school. Not at the library, not at graduation. But your mom? She was always there. Even if she sat alone in the back row." Liam shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," she added. "I'm saying it because I care, but I don't want to see you become like him. So convinced you're right you forget to ask what's true." She didn't threaten to break up, didn't guilt him. She just placed the mirror down and walked away. "You need to figure out who you want to be," she said before leaving. That night, Liam walked home alone. The wind sliced through his hoodie. As he reached the front porch, he dug his hands into his pockets and pulled out a crumpled grocery list. Beatrice's list from that morning. It had the same loops and underlines she always insisted on. No pen allowed. Pencil only. And in that moment, he remembered something small but piercing. "The notes I used to leave on the kitchen counter. Low on eggs. Don't forget. Dad's stomach pills. Heat oven before 6. He used to toss them aside without reading." Now he held a list and realized he didn't even know how to write one himself. "The next morning I got a call. Not from Dennis. From Liam." His voice was quiet. No edge. Just breath. "Mom," he said. "I get it now, what you did, all those years. It wasn't easy. But you did it well." I didn't respond. Because some words don't need answers. Some words are the answer. Dennis's life crumbled with the same quiet insistence mine had once held together. Only now, there was no one left to catch the falling plate. When the court officially granted our divorce, he didn't rage like I expected. He just sat there, stiff and gray, like wet concrete hardening in cold weather. Jenna handled everything with her usual crispness, efficient, firm, humane. I didn't make unreasonable demands. I didn't want to burn bridges. I simply didn't want to be the one holding them up anymore. I asked for a fair division of our shared assets. And I asked for the return of a particular joint savings account Dennis had claimed had gone toward household maintenance. Jenna pulled the minutes. The purchases were clear. Spa memberships in Veronica's name. Italian leather bags. charges from boutique wineries out of state, places I'd never even heard of. Dennis had actually believed they were justifiable, that treating Veronica was somehow household business. When Jenna laid it all out in front of him, each charge, each date, his face cracked like old plaster. But the real twist came later. Right after the final court date, Veronica announced she had business to handle out of state. She packed up and disappeared. No goodbye, no note. Not even a coffee cup left in the sink. She didn't forget the jar of wild Maine honey, though. Took it right out of the fridge on her way out the door. Dennis called her in a rage. "What the hell was I to you?" he yelled. According to town whispers, Veronica just laughed. Calm and light. "You said it yourself, Dennis. You were generous. Voluntary. You offered, I accepted." He spat something about betrayal. She chuckled again. "Then consider it a tuition fee. You paid to learn the lesson." And with that, she hung up. Gone like vapor. Turns out, he wasn't her next chapter. He was just a page. With Beatrice in full-time care, Liam trying to rebuild his life and no one left to shield him, Dennis finally stood in the mess he'd made. And this time, there was no one to sweep it up. Meanwhile, my life moved forward, not in leaps, but in firm, meaningful steps. I walked every day, sometimes to the flower shop below my apartment, sometimes to the market to pick out thread or fabric or honey that I'd never shared. I stitched in the afternoons, mailed out orders twice a week, and even began sketching new designs for custom requests. One bride asked for 10 quilted clutches as bridesmaid gifts. "I want something that feels like a hug," she'd written. "Not store-bought, not cold." And when the box arrived, she messaged me with a photo of her bridesmaids holding the clutches, eyes red from crying. "You can't buy that feeling in bulk." Liam continued visiting. Not often, but consistently, respectfully. He helped me set up better lighting for my product photos, showed me how to sort orders by region, taught me to track expenses digitally, though I still preferred my hand-bound ledger. He even came to one of the weekend craft markets, unprompted, helped May and me set up the booth, asked a customer if she needed help carrying her order to the car. That night, over dinner, he told me he was moving out of Dennis's place. "It's too heavy there," he said simply, like the walls are still yelling. I nodded. I knew that weight. "I want to be better," he said. "I don't know how yet, but I want to try." And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something between us that was more than obligation. It was honest effort. We didn't need to rebuild what we had. We just had to build something new. One afternoon, while sorting fabric samples, May looked up from her chair and said, "You know, it's funny. You started over with nothing, but you've got more now than most people ever get." I paused, a strip of pale green velvet in my hands. "It doesn't feel like nothing." She smiled. "Exactly. Because it didn't. My apartment wasn't just walls and windows. It was proof. It was evidence that dignity could bloom late, and love, true, platonic, steady love, could come from places you never expected. I had community, a job that mattered, creations with purpose. I had my name on shipping labels, my words in customer thank you notes. My time was mine, and in that quiet reclamation, I had built a life where I was no longer invisible. I was not a ghost. I was not a servant. I was normal. One Sunday evening, as I sat on the balcony sipping tea and watching the sunset turn the rooftops gold, Liam stepped out beside me. "Hey, Mom." He held something out to me, a folded piece of fabric, soft, familiar. "I found this in Dad's attic. Thought it looked like something you'd made." I unfolded it. It was the old patchwork skirt, the one I'd sewn all those years ago, the one Dennis told me made me look ridiculous. Embarrassing. "Like you're headed to a prom," he'd said. I thought it had been thrown out. But here it was. Worn, yes, but whole. I held it gently in my lap, fingers tracing the seams. "You made it when I was 10, Liam said. "I remember it twirling when you spun around in the kitchen." I smiled, eyes misting. "I haven't seen this in 20 years. Do you want to fix it up?" he asked. "Maybe wear it again?" I nodded slowly. "I think I will." That night I placed the skirt on my sewing table, smoothed the fabric with both hands. It felt like touching a memory, not a wound, but a promise. This time, When I wore it, I would do it for me. Unlike the chaos unraveling inside Dennis's house, my life had become something steady, soft as cotton, firm as stitched seams. The Tuesday quilting circle at Willow Haven had grown so much we had to move it to the larger rec room. Residents fought gently, like sweet old sisters, over who got to sit beside me. Mrs. Klein brought in a tattered quilt top from her childhood and asked me to restore it. I spent 2 weeks patching it by hand, thread by loving thread. When I gave it back, she cried. "This feels like a second life," she whispered. I knew exactly what she meant. Each stitch I made now served a purpose. Each design I sold put money in my account and warmth in someone's hands. I was no longer making things just to fill silence. I was building, living, giving. My name, Nora Dawson, began to carry a different weight, not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, but as a woman whose creations held the kind of care the world forgot to teach. And then, one chilly Thursday morning, as I packed Threadnest orders into craft envelopes, I received a message that made me pause. "Hi Nora, I came across your shop through a friend. Your work is beautiful. I'd love to feature your story in our Artisan Spotlight next month, if you're open to it." It was from a regional online magazine. I blinked, reread the message. My story. They wanted to hear my story. For a long time I sat there, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure how to respond. Not because I didn't want to say yes, but because for the first time I truly realized I had a story, one that belonged to me, not shaped by someone else's opinion, not cut off in the middle by louder voices or colder stares, mine. So I said yes. That month, they interviewed me over tea and oat cookies. The writer asked about my quilts, my market stall, my apartment above the flower shop. She asked how it all started, and I told her, simply, I left. She smiled. Was it hard? Unbearably, I answered, until it was. When the article went live, May printed 3 copies and framed one for the hallway at Willow Haven. The photo they used was me standing on my balcony in that patchwork skirt, a mug in my hand, smiling at something just out of frame. They titled the article "Second Thread, A Woman's Quiet Reclaiming." Liam read it too. He texted me after, "I'm proud of you, Mom. So proud." There was no bitterness in his message, no weight, just admiration. He and Ivy were still dating, and something in him had shifted for good. He cooked now, real meals. I even helped him put together a holiday recipe box for Ivy's parents, filled with ginger biscotti and embroidered napkins. He no longer asked me to explain the past. He just made room for me in the present. That was enough. As for Dennis, I heard little. May said he was renting a small apartment now near the edge of town, alone, rarely seen. The kind of man who once walked like he owned the street, now crossing it with his shoulders hunched and his eyes to the ground. And Beatrice, too, had grown quiet. The staff at Willow Haven mentioned she asked about me sometimes. Not with warmth, just curiosity, like a child poking a bruise to see if it still hurt. But I didn't visit. I didn't write. I didn't owe her, or Dennis, anything. My silence wasn't revenge. It was peace. One evening near the start of spring, I stood at my balcony and looked out at Willowton glowing beneath the golden hour. Kids darted through the alley chasing bubbles. The air carried the scent of rising bread from the bakery next door. I could hear May's laughter rising from the street below as she bartered for candles at the weekend fair. I thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I'd found, about the nights I spent crying into a towel in a locked bathroom, the dinners I served with aching feet and an empty stomach, the years of being spoken to like a burden, like an afterthought, and that day when I finally stood up and said, "No more." I'd worried for so long that it would destroy everything, but instead it created something new. It gave birth to the life I should have had all along. There are women everywhere like the one I used to be, folded into corners holding entire households together while being told they aren't enough. Some of them will leave. Some won't. Some can't. But for the ones who do, if this story finds them, I want them to know. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not the worst thing they ever said to. You are not finished. And the moment you decide to choose yourself, not in bitterness, not in anger, but in truth, that moment is the beginning of everything. I stepped inside and turned off the balcony light. My quilted skirt swished softly as I walked toward the sewing table. There, waiting for me, was a new order. Custom baby quilt, soft blues, personalized stitching, needed in 3 weeks. I picked up my needle, smiled, and began. Nora's story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to choose yourself. After 3 decades of being unseen and unheard in her own home, she finally stepped out, not just through the front door but into a life of dignity, purpose, and her quiet rebellion wasn't driven by hate or vengeance, but by a deep, long overdue recognition of her own worth. This story speaks to anyone who's ever been taken for granted, who's ever sacrificed too much, and who wonders if it's too late to start over. It's not. You deserve more than survival. You deserve a life that feeds your soul. If this story moved you, or made you think, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support helps me tell more powerful, emotional stories like this one. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or region in the comments below so we can see how far these stories are traveling. Thank you for being here. Your voice, your presence, it matters.